The sun over the American West was merciless. A scorching 104 degrees that turned the air into something sharp and breathless. Asphalt shimmered like liquid. But there was no water. No relief, only heat rising from the road like punishment. Clara Bennett crouched on the roadside, her cotton dress torn, her knees bloodied, her skin sunburned and peeling. But none of it mattered, not the blood, not the pain, not the shame. All that mattered was the tiny, fragile weight in her arms. "Ellie," she whispered, her voice raw, cracked by thirst and grief. "Baby, please wake up. My love, please don't scare Mama like this. I can't lose you too." The little girl, 5 years old, lay limp against her chest. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips dry and cracked. Her tiny fingers curled loosely around the hem of Clara's dress. She had not stirred for the last hour. Car after car passed them. None slowed, none looked. The world moved on. And Clara remained, a mother with nothing left but a child slowly fading in her arms. She closed her eyes, trying not to remember, but the memories were like needles. Only hours ago, she had stood at the gates of the Whitmore estate, the home she once called hers. Beatrice Whitmore had stood in white linen, hands folded, gaze icy. "You are not family anymore," she said coldly. "You brought death to my son." Charles was drunk. Clara had pleaded. He was angry. He should not have driven. Beatrice's voice sliced through hers. "He is dead because of you. His wife. His curse." Beside her, Percy Langston, the family's advisor, pointed to the gate. "Leave now, want to thank you for turning me, or we will have you arrested." Clara had clutched Ellie, fevered and crying, and begged, "Please, Ajida, please. Just let me call a doctor. She needs help." But they slammed the gate shut, and she had heard the metallic click of it locking. She had turned away, "Want to thank you for turning me." Holding her daughter, stumbling down the long driveway with bare feet and burning skin. Halfway down, Ellie had tripped. Her head hit the concrete, her arm bent wrong. Clara had screamed, but no one had come. Later, she called her mother back in Montana. A last hope. "Mama, I need a place to stay for a few days. Just until I figure something out." Her mother's reply was cold. Firm. "We told you not to marry into that family. You chose Charles. Now deal with what comes." Clara's voice cracked. "But Ellie's sick. I have nothing more to say," her father had said, and then silence. They hung up. Now Clara sat on the roadside like discarded trash, clutching a 5-year-old girl with a swollen arm, burning skin, and failing breath. Her canvas bag, torn and useless, lay at her feet. A bottle of water, nearly empty and too warm to be comforting, stood between them and nothingness. Clara bent her head, her lips trembling against her daughter's forehead. "God, if someone has to go, let it be me. Please. Not her, take me instead." The air shimmered. The heat pressed down like an invisible hand. No one stopped, not even to ask until someone did. The hum of an engine slowing, then the crunch of tires on gravel. Clara did not lift her head. She had no more hope left to lift anything. The truck door creaked open. Boots on the gravel. A shadow fell across her and Ellie. Then silence. Finally, a voice not loud, not demanding, just steady, just real. "The little girl's burning up. I've got cold water, a truck with AC, and a doctor who owes me a favor." Clara didn't move. She couldn't. She had been hurt too many times to react to kindness. Her arms tightened around Ellie. "I won't touch either of you," the man said again, softer now. "I'll just leave this here." She looked up, a tall man, early 40s, faded jeans, gray shirt, worn boots, weathered skin, eyes not sharp but tired, kind in a quiet way. He placed a sealed bottle of cold water gently on the ground a few feet away and stepped back. No threats, no questions, no judgments, just space, just presence. Clara blinked hard, looked down at Ellie, whose lips had turned even paler, her breathing shallow, rapid. She reached out with shaking hands, grabbed the bottle, unscrewed the cap, poured a few drops on her fingers, and rubbed them on Ellie's lips. The man did not move. Clara looked up at him. He said nothing more. She nodded, not because she trusted him, not because she believed the nightmare was over, But because at last, someone had not turned away. Someone had stayed. He opened the truck's back door. Clara gathered Ellie, rose slowly on trembling legs, and stepped toward him, toward shade, toward water, toward the first sliver of humanity she had seen in what felt like forever. Not safety yet. But no longer alone. Not this time. The truck hummed steadily down the long highway. The wind outside thick with dust and heat. Inside, silence filled the space. Clara sat in the back seat, arms wrapped tightly around Ellie, her 5-year-old daughter, whose head rested limply against her chest. Fever radiated through the child's thin dress like a furnace. Every now and then, Clara leaned down to whisper her name, check her breathing, press her lips to her forehead. In the driver's seat, the man said nothing. He adjusted the rearview mirror not for traffic, but to watch the child. He glanced at her chest to ensure it still rose and fell. No words passed between him and Clara. His hands gripped the wheel with calm steadiness, but his eyes never strayed long from the mirror. Clara sat stiff, alert. She didn't know who he was, but something deep in her gut told her he wasn't a threat. Not tonight. Not when Ellie's life was slipping through her arms and no one else had stopped. 15 minutes in, the man pulled over. Clara's heart jumped. He didn't speak, just stepped out, walked to the back, retrieved a cooler, and returned. From a side pocket, he pulled a soft towel, soaked it in cold water, and gently laid it on Ellie's burning forehead. Noticing Clara shivering, her skin damp, chilled by the truck's AC, he removed his denim jacket and, without touching her, draped it over her shoulders from behind. Clara flinched, but when she looked up, he was already seated again, hands resting, gaze fixed ahead in the mirror. His eyes met hers for a moment, and he said, keep it. The night's getting colder. By the time they reached his ranch, night had settled. The truck rolled through a wooden gate and stopped in front of a brick farmhouse with white shutters and a porch wrapped in quiet shadows. He stepped out, unlocked the door, flicked on a few lights, then turned back. Guest rooms on the left. Warm water in the kitchen. Medicines in the top drawer. He didn't ask her name. Didn't say make yourself at home. He simply opened the door, walked a few steps ahead, and left her there. It didn't feel like hospitality. It felt like quiet preparedness, as if he'd expected someone, maybe not her, but someone, to need this. Inside the room, Clara laid Ellie on the bed. The girl's breathing had steadied, but she was still warm, her skin damp with fever. Clara looked around. No towels, no basin. Panic creeping in, she rushed into the hallway. When she returned, she froze. At the foot of the bed sat a basin filled with warm water, steam rising gently. Folded towels, both wet and dry, lay beside it. On top, a note in simple handwriting, water's warm. Test it first. Use the soft cloth on her skin. He was gone. Clara dropped to her knees and began wiping Ellie's face, arms, legs. The girl whimpered faintly but didn't wake. Clara reached for another towel, and there beneath it found a small wooden hair trish, worn smooth. Beside it, another note. My daughter used to love this one. I hope it makes your little girl feel just as safe. Clara's breath caught. She hadn't cried when they threw her out. Not when her own parents turned away. Not when she carried her feverish child through sun and gravel. But now, holding this brush, this note, this quiet kindness from a man who hadn't asked a single question, she broke. Tears spilled silently. She pressed the brush to her chest, then gently stroked it through Ellie's tangled hair. The little girl stirred and murmured, Mama, this brush smells nice. Clara let out a broken laugh. Then the sobs came harder. In the hallway, Silas leaned against the wall, eyes closed. He could hear her crying, but he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't knock. It had been a long time since someone else's pain stirred anything in him. But tonight, something shifted. Not pity, not duty, something quieter, more human, and he let it rise in his chest as the house, once silent and still, finally breathed again with grief and with hope. Morning crept gently through the curtains of the guest room, soft and golden. Clara stirred, her back aching slightly from the floor where she had slept beside the bed. The first thing she heard was Ellie's breathing, steady, rhythmic, and real. She opened her eyes and saw her daughter still asleep, color having returned to her cheeks. Her lips no longer cracked. Her small hand now relaxed on the sheets. The fever had broken sometime in the night. Clara sat up slowly. The quiet of the house was unfamiliar but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came from space, not absence. On the nightstand, a tray set waiting, 2 slices of toast, a small bowl of jam, a hard-boiled egg, and beside it, a glass of milk for Ellie and a note for Clara. Kitchen's open. I'll be in the garden. She blinked at it for a moment, then looked around the room. Still no sign of the man who had saved them. She helped Ellie sit up and fed her slowly. The little girl nibbled at the toast, drank some milk, and then leaned into her mother's shoulder with a sleepy hum. When Clara ventured into the hallway, Ellie in her arms, she found a folded piece of paper on the floor just outside the room, a paper airplane. White, clean, carefully made. Scrawled across one wing in careful block letters were the words, "For Ellie." Ellie smiled when she saw it. "Did you make this, Mama?" No, Clara said softly. "But someone did. Just for you." They spent the morning in the room, Ellie coloring quietly, while Clara tittied what she could. Around noon, as the sun climbed high, Clara stepped outside. She found Silas bent over in the garden, dirt on his jeans, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He looked up as she approached but did not rise. "Mint's dying," he said simply, gesturing to a patch of half-withered leaves. "It's been overgrown with weeds. Roots are still good, though." Clara knelt beside him. "I used to garden," she murmured, brushing her hands through the soil. Before everything, she pulled a weed, then another. They worked in silence, hands moving in rhythm, breaths matching without trying. The mint began to take shape again beneath their fingers, green, clean, and fragrant. As they stood, brushing soil from their palms, Silas looked at her, for the first time since the night before. His voice was quiet, almost unsure. "I'm sorry," he said. Clara turned slightly, confused. "For what?" He hesitated. "Not for anything I did, but for what you've had to carry alone." That was it, just that. Not pity, not a promise to fix anything, just acknowledgement. Clara blinked, the sun stinging her eyes, or maybe it was something else. No one had ever said that to her. Not even her own family. "I didn't know it was okay to feel angry," she admitted. "Or tired. Or anything. I thought I just had to keep going." Silas nodded, dusting his hands on his pants. "Sometimes surviving becomes a habit." They walked back toward the house, side by side. Later that afternoon, Clara sat on the porch while Ellie napped again. Silas brought her a glass of water, sat beside her, and said nothing. There was no need to speak. Inside the house, mint leaves steeped quietly in hot water. A small airplane rested beside a glass of crayons. And in the earth, something green had begun to grow again. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt something settle inside her, not safety, not trust, not yet, but space to breathe, space to stay, even if just for a while. Rain tapped gently against the wooden roof of the porch, a steady rhythm that filled the silence without intruding. The late afternoon sky had turned a muted gray, and the scent of wet earth drifted in with the breeze. Inside, little Ellie slept, curled beneath a patchwork blanket, her small frame finally resting easy. Clara sat on the porch steps, cradling a warm mug of tea in her hands. She didn't drink it, just held it close, letting the heat seep into her skin. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, not watching the rain, but remembering something far away. Silas sat a few feet from her in an old rocking chair. He placed a kettle on the small side table but didn't pour himself anything. He didn't ask questions, didn't make noise. He just waited, not for answers, just to stay nearby. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was honest. Finally, Clara spoke. "Charles used to be charming," she said, barely above a whisper. "The kind of man people smiled at in grocery stores. He was funny, kind when he wanted to be, but not good." Silas said nothing. His eyes stayed on the edge of the porch where the rain hit the steps. Clara's fingers tightened around the mug. "The day after our wedding, he changed. He took over my bank account, my phone. He said it was for convenience. She gave a small, bitter smile. Then it was my clothes. My friends. My time. She paused. If I didn't want to go to a dinner party because Ellie had a fever, he'd yell. Once, he slammed his fist into the wall right beside my face. Said you don't get to say no. Understand? The tea had gone cold. She didn't notice. He made me feel like I was nothing without him. And for a while, I believed it. The rain fell harder, drumming on the roof above them. Neither moved. Clara's voice dropped lower. 1 year ago, the night he died, he was drunk, called me from his car, screaming because I didn't show up at some charity event. I stayed home with Ellie. She had a fever. She was crying. He wouldn't stop yelling. I hung up. She swallowed hard. An hour later, I heard the sirens. Didn't know it was him at first. Not until Beatrice came banging on the door. Clara shook her head slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't ask. She just looked at me and said, "You're the curse that killed my son. You never belonged to this family." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the mug down beside her. She made my life hell every day after that. Passive jabs. Looks that cut deeper than words. One morning, she told me I shouldn't touch the photo frames. Said my hands brought bad luck. Clara laughed once. Dry and quiet. After almost a year, she finally said the words, "Get out." And that was it. I had nowhere else to go. Her voice broke just slightly. My own mother told me you chose wrong. Now live with it. My father hung up. She rubbed her palms on her jeans, like trying to erase the weight of those words from her skin. I didn't know where to go. I didn't even pack a full bag. I just picked up Ellie and ran. A pause. Then softly, Silas slid a folded napkin across the porch for not a word. Just a gesture. Clara took it, dabbed at the corners of her eyes. "I'm not crying for them," she said. "I'm crying because for once, someone didn't ask me to explain. You just let me be." Silas leaned back slightly in his chair, the wood creaking. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said gently. "You survived something most people wouldn't understand." Silence again. Then Clara turned slightly toward him. "Do you ever worry?" she asked, voice barely audible. "That if you love again, they might leave? That you lose them too?" Silas didn't look at her right away. His gaze stayed out on the rain-drenched grass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I worry every day." He looked down at his hands. "But do you know what scares me more? That I'll never try again. That I'll keep living like I already died with them." Clara nodded slowly, her eyes stinging not from pain, but from something tender, something unfamiliar. The rain continued to fall, steady and soft. No declarations were made. No promises, just to people sitting close enough to feel the same weight. And for the first time in a long while, not having to carry it alone. The envelope came in the late morning, tucked between an electricity bill and a coupon flyer. Clara found it in the old mailbox at the end of the ranch driveway. Her fingers trembled the moment she saw the seal, Shady Valley County Court. Custody petition. She stared at it for a long time. The breeze rustled the dry grass around her, but she stood frozen. Back inside, the house was quiet. Ellie was playing near the fireplace, humming softly to herself, while Silas fixed a drawer in the kitchen. Clara sat on the edge of the couch, tore the envelope open with a numbness that scared her more than the contents. The words stabbed off the page: petition for legal guardianship. Beatrice Whitmore versus Clara Bennett. Grounds: endangerment, negligence, mental instability. Requested relief: sole custody of minor child Eleanor Bennett. Age 5. Her eyes blurred. She barely heard Ellie skipping into the room. The girl noticed the papers in her mother's hand, then the color draining from her face. "Mama," she whispered. "What's wrong?" Clara tried to smile. Failed. It's nothing. Sweetheart, just papers." Ellie looked down at the page. She could not read most of it, but she saw her name. "Am I going away?" Clara flinched. "What? Are they taking me?" Ellie's eyes widened, voice quivering. "Did I do something bad?" Clara dropped the papers and gathered her daughter in her arms, clutching her so tightly it made them both shake. No, why thank you for joining me," she whispered. No, thank you for joining me. No, you didn't do anything. You are perfect." You are mine. From the doorway, Silas stood silently. He had seen the return address. Read the tension in Clara's shoulders the moment she stepped inside. He walked over, crouched beside them. If you can't hold on to her, he said softly, then we will. Clara looked at him, eyes wild with fear. She's all I have. Silas didn't flinch. And that's all the reason we need. The next few days blurred. Clara did not sleep much. Her hands trembled each time she brushed Ellie's hair, as if she feared it would be the last time. She stopped going into town. She couldn't bear the stares, the quiet whispers somehow they already knew. At the market a week earlier, she'd overheard a woman mutter, "The Whitmore boy's widow. Poor child. Doesn't stand a chance." The words had followed her like smoke. Ellie had noticed too. "Why don't they talk to you anymore?" she had asked, eyes round and confused. "Why do they look like that?" Clara tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could she make a 5-year-old understand the cruelty of adults? The fear people had of stories they didn't care to understand? One evening, while Ellie slept, Clara sat at the kitchen table, staring at the court papers, heart pounding. Silas placed a mug of tea in front of her, then sat across from her without a word. "I can't lose her," Clara whispered. "I'll die if they take her." Silas leaned forward slightly, voice low and sure. "Then you fight." She looked up at him. "Clara, you've already survived worse. You've carried her through storms most people would drown in. And you're still here." Tears welled in her eyes. "But what if that's not enough? Then I'll stand with you," he said, "because I've never seen anyone fight as hard as you just to love someone." Clara covered her face with both hands, her body trembling from everything she'd held inside. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she sat at Ellie's bedside, stroking her hair. "Mama," the child murmured in her sleep. "Yes, baby. You won't let them take me, right?" Clara closed her eyes. "Never," she whispered. "Not in this lifetime." And something settled in her chest then, not peace, not hope, but resolve, a fire not born from rage, but from love that refused to let go. She had been abandoned, insulted, itchgawi bones, erased, but no one would take her daughter. Not while she could still breathe. Not while her hands could still hold. Not this time. The town was small, and whispers traveled faster than the wind. At first, Clara noticed the silence. Greetings that once came with polite smiles turned into curt nods or complete avoidance. Then came the stares, those long and blinking gazes that said everything people would not say to her face. "She's staying at Silas Whitmore's place now. Can you believe it? She must be charming him into letting her stay. Bet she's after his land, that girl and her daughter. They know how to survive." Clara tried to ignore it, but then came the words that cut deeper. "She's not even from here. I heard. The girl's not even Charles's daughter. The whole thing's just a setup." At the bakery, she stood in line for 20 minutes. When it was finally her turn, the woman behind the counter looked through her like she was made of glass. "We're sold out," she said, even though 2 loaves of fresh sourdough sat on the display shelf behind her. Clara said nothing, just nodded and walked out. Outside, Ellie clung to her hand, her little feet barely keeping up. When they got home, Clara placed her purse on the kitchen table and reached for the skillet. But her hands were trembling so badly she couldn't grip the handle. She leaned forward, both palms flat on the counter, breathing hard. "Mama." Ellie's voice came soft and scared from the living room. "Did I do something wrong?" Clara shook her head, swallowing the lump in her throat. No, baby. No, never." She sat down on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, unable to stop her hands from shaking. That evening, Silas came in from the barn and found Clara still in the same spot, a pot of uncooked rice on the stove, and no light on in the kitchen. He didn't say a word. He crossed the room, knelt beside her, and gently took her hand in his. She looked at him, eyes swollen with unshed tears, lips parted but silent. He rose, still holding her hand, and led her out the back door. They walked through the cool grass, past the edge of the garden where mint and rosemary now grew in neat lines, until they reached the old willow tree that stood near the fence line. He sat down first. Clara hesitated, then followed. They said nothing for a long time. The breeze stirred the branches above them, casting shifting shadows over their faces. Finally, Silas spoke, his voice low, steady. "You can stay quiet when the world is screaming," he said, "but you do not have to stay quiet when you're with me." Clara turned her face toward him, her throat tightening. "I don't want to ruin your life," she whispered. "I see the way people look at you now, like you've made a mistake. Like you've let someone like me into a place too good for me." Silas met her eyes. "If anyone in this town thinks I'm a fool for letting a woman stay who saved her child with nothing but bare hands and a breaking heart," he said, "then maybe I don't care much for their judgment." He paused, then added, "You didn't ask to be here, but I'm glad you are." Clara blinked fast. The silence between them thickened, but it was not empty, it was full of every unspoken ache, every hidden bruise, every lonely moment neither had dared voice aloud. "I feel like I'm carrying a sign around my neck," she said, "like people see me and only remember what I've lost, what I failed at." Silas reached down, pulled up a blade of grass, rolled it between his fingers. "I don't see that," he said. "What do you see?" "A woman who hasn't stopped fighting. Even when she's tired. Even when she wanted to." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them. And Silas didn't reach to wipe them either. He just sat with her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. They stayed like that for a long time beneath the soft hush of the willow. Because sometimes the loudest thing a person could do was choose to stay beside someone in silence, and that silence shared was louder than any rumor, any doubt, any loneliness. The sound of hooves against dirt filled the quiet morning air. Silas stood in the stable, brushing down his mare. Steady and grounded, the barn had always been his place of peace. He heard her footsteps before she spoke. Still using the old brush. Came a familiar voice. He turned. His mother, Eleanor Whitmore, stood in the doorway, her beige coat buttoned, her hair pinned neatly. There was no judgment in her voice. Just quiet observation. "I heard about the girl," she said. Silas continued brushing. After a pause, he set the brush down and turned to face her. She and her daughter needed somewhere safe. Eleanor stepped closer. "Are you sure this is safety for you too?" He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She exhaled. "You've built a life here that doesn't hurt anymore. But she's still bleeding. Are you ready for that? Ready to carry more weight again?" Silas glanced at his rough hands. "Maybe that's what makes it feel real." That evening, dinner passed quietly. Clara had cooked something simple: roasted vegetables, bread, soup. She moved with care in the kitchen, her words few, her eyes lowered. Ellie sat beside her, hands folded neatly, trying hard to be good. Eleanor said little, but she watched everything: the way Clara gently wiped Ellie's mouth, how she cut the bread with hands used to doing harder things, how she comforted the child without raising her voice even when soup spilled on her shirt. After dinner, Eleanor looked at Clara. "Would you join me a moment?" Clara followed her to the porch. The air was cool. The scent of mint lingered in the breeze. Eleanor leaned on the railing, her eyes on the horizon. "I didn't come to oppose," she said. "I came because I'm a mother. I've lost. And I know how grief changes people, not just in the moment, but in all the moments after." She turned. "My worry isn't who you are. It's what happens if Silas opens his heart again and you leave." Clara folded her hands in her lap. "I'm not asking to belong or to be trusted. I only know I won't hurt him. If I thought I would, I'd go." Eleanor studied her. "You talk like someone who expects to be pushed away." Clara gave a small, sad smile. "It's happened enough." Silence stretched between them. Eleanor's voice softened. "I know what it's like to outlive your child. And the silence that follows. It's the loudest sound in the world." Clara nodded. "It's all I've heard for a year." Eleanor looked down. Then without a word, she went back inside. The next morning, Clara awoke to the smell of something warm and buttery in the kitchen. Eleanor was placing a plate of scones on the table. "I used to make these for Silas when he was small," she said. "They're better with honey." Ellie clapped her hands. "They smell like cookies." Clara blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you," she said quietly. Eleanor looked up. Children remember the small things: a warm kitchen, a smile at breakfast. Make sure she remembers. There were no hugs, No speeches, bizarre, but when Eleanor poured 3 cups of tea, it was enough. Something had shifted, not erased the distance, but softened it, and for Clara, that was the start of something she hadn't dared hope for in a long time. The courtroom was cool and sterile. The walls a pale shade of gray. Clara sat at the front, hands clenched tightly in her lap, her shoulders drawn in as if bracing for one last blow. Silas sat beside her, still and composed. Behind them, Eleanor sat in the second row, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression unreadable, but her presence said everything. When the judge read the final decision, Clara didn't breathe. Petitioner's request for custody is denied. Full legal custody remains with the child's mother, Clara Bennett. There was no cheer, no outburst, just a silence so vast it swallowed every thought in her head. And then she turned slowly, almost afraid to meet anyone's gaze. Eleanor reached across the space between the benches and gently squeezed Silas's hand, a subtle gesture. But when Clara met her eyes, the older woman gave a small nod. Clara didn't smile, but her eyes, glassy with tears, spoke the words she couldn't say. That night, the dinner table looked like any other, but it wasn't. Ellie chatted about her new crayons and a girl at school who let her borrow a glitter sticker. Clara listened, nodding. The soft clink of cutlery and the smell of roasted vegetables surrounded them like a blanket. Silas passed the bread. Eleanor scooped more mashed potatoes onto Clara's plate without a word. There was no toast, no announcement, but something was different. No longer were they for people sharing space. They were sharing life. Later that week, Clara and Silas worked side by side in the garden, pulling up weeds and trimming back the spring growth. The sun dipped low. Want to thank you for joining me. Painting the grass in amber light. Ellie sat nearby on a blanket, coloring quietly, her small voice humming to herself. Clara wiped her forehead with the back of her arm, dirt smudged on her cheek. She looked at Silas, who was inspecting the mint patch. Do you ever think, she said softly, that people only stay if they don't know the whole story? He glanced at her, puzzled. I want to thank you for joining me. She hesitated. I've never believed anyone would stay after they saw everything. The broken parts. The pieces I've had to glue back together just to breathe. Silas leaned on the rake. Eyes gentle. I see all of it. Clara, he said. That's why I'm still here. She didn't reply, but her breath hitched not from sadness, but from the terrifying, beautiful realization that he meant it. He wasn't waiting for her to be perfect. He was just choosing to stay. As the evening cooled, they packed up their tools and walked back toward the house. Ellie raced ahead to show Eleanor her drawing, 2 tall figures and a small girl holding hands under a tree. On the porch, Clara and Silas sat on the old swing side by side, hands coated in the scent of fresh earth. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. He reached over, took her hand, and laced his fingers through hers. No pressure. No promise. Just presence. Ellie's laughter rang out in the yard, full and bright, chasing the last light of day into the sky. Inside the house, the lights glowed soft and golden, and for the first time in a long time, the walls did not echo with silence but with life, with movement, with family not built from ceremony or blood, but from the quiet decision to keep showing up, to stay. A voice, gentle almost like a memory, closed the moment like a narrator stepping back. They didn't begin in love. They began in grief, in brokenness, in fear, and day by day downs. They didn't heal with time, they healed with each other. If this story touched something deep in your heart, if you saw a part of yourself in Clara's silence, in Silas's stillness, or in little Ellie's innocent hope, then you're not alone. Somewhere out there, someone is quietly surviving what no one sees. And sometimes, all it takes is one hand reaching out and choosing not to let go. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we believe in the quiet power of compassion, resilience, and the kind of love that does not shout but stays. If you felt moved by this journey, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, where we share true-to-life stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the goodness still found in everyday hearts. Because sometimes, the stories we need most are the ones that stay with us long after the screen fades to black. Subscribe now to Soul-Stirring Stories, and let the next story find its way to your soul.